So I wanted to do a continuation of why the comparison of Trump to Hitler is so absolutely utterly ridiculous. Now uh, I did a couple of these before, but besides Trump not serving in the military, not being a competent leader, and in other ways, not having a serious job, like Hitler worked a number of serious jobs prior to being, Chancellor of Germany. The other thing is dietary and personal habits. Mr. Hitler was he was an anti-vivisectionist. He was against animal experimentation, but also he was an ethical vegetarian. He became an ethical vegetarian. So some people have wondered why why are so many white supremacists into veganism, blah, 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 blah. Okay, you can read this on your own. This is not important. This is just a Vice article on it. But Savitri Devi did not develop these ideas. These ideas were present before her, but she became very heavy into Ariosophy, which is the concept of the magical concepts of Anton Drexler. But more importantly, Savitri Devi was heavy duty into Hinduism, and I'm going to point that out later. So this is the Adolf Hitler and vegetarianism. So, of course, there's contemporary records. Do you know that your Fuhrer is a vegetarian? Blah, 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 blah. And this goes back and forth, but factually speaking, he was definitely a vegetarian, at least towards the end of the war. But not only for health reasons, people say it was for health reasons, but in reality, Dr. Morell, his doctor, actually thought that, he shouldn't be a vegetarian. Of course, Dr. Morell was a crazy person, but that's besides the point. But this is just about his diet. So, of course, there are instances of him eating meat because he wasn't always a vegetarian. Most vegetarians weren't always vegetarians, of course. Hitler does not eat meat, drink alcoholic beverages, or smoke. This is all very well known that Hitler was very much against drinking, alcohol, smoking, etc. He would have beer, like maybe at a table as part of a show, but he was not a big drinker. He certainly wasn't a smoker. In fact, he was known to have given watches to members of his entourage that gave up smoking. According to the woman that tested Hitler's food, his taste tester, she tested his food for poison. Somebody has to taste the food to make sure it's not poisoned. So Hitler's only surviving food taster has claimed that the Fuhrer was a dedicated vegetarian during his stay at the Wolfslair in World War II. Margaret Volak, 95, said that Hitler ate only the freshest fruit and vegetables during the 2.5 years that she was forced to check his food for traces of poison. During World War II, Volek, a German citizen whose husband had been sent to fight, was taken by the Schutzstaffel to Hitler's Eastern Front headquarters in modern-day Poland, known as the Wolfslair. There she joined a team of a dozen other women whose job it was to protect Hitler from any attempts to poison him, the Telegraph reported. Between 11 and 12 o'clock, we had to taste the food, and only after all of us had tried it was it driven to headquarters by the SS. It was all vegetarian. The most delicious, freshest things, from asparagus to peppers and peas, served with rice and salads. It was all arranged on a plate, just as it was served to him. There was no meat, and I do not remember any fish, she said. Of course, I was afraid if it had been poisoned, I would not be here today. We were forced to eat it. We had no choice, she added. Hitler's apparent enthusiasm for vegetarianism reflected the Nazi obsession with Aryan bodily purity. In the Hitler Youth Manual of the 1930s, it promoted the use of soybeans, which it called Nazi beans, as an alternative to meat. In 1942, now, you should also read Back to Eden by Jethro Kloss, where he talks about the power of soybeans and why we should switch to a bean-centered diet and whatnot. Where am I at? In the 1942, Hitler told Joseph Goebbels that he intended to convert Germany to vegetarianism when he won the war. But although he referred to meat broth as corpse tea, he was not fastidious about declining meat. Dion Lucas, his cook before the war, claimed that now this is before the war, so you have to understand, at some point in Mr. Hitler's life, Mr. Hitler made the conscious decision to choose to become a vegetarian, just like we all do. So Dion Lucas, his cook, before the war, claimed that he was a fan of stuffed pigeon. And he was also known to be partial to Bavarian sausages and the occasional slice of ham. His table manners also came under scrutiny. In a secret diary, one German soldier wrote, "Hitler eats rapidly, mechanically. He abstractly bites his fingernails. He runs his index finger back and forth under his nose, and his table manners are little short of shocking." Hitler spent 800 days at the Wolf's Lair between 1941 and 1944, when he abandoned it as the Russians approached. Voelk is believed to be the only surviving member of Hitler's food tasting team. Okay, we're going to move forward here. Now, I would like to point out, they like to talk about tracing the link between natural food and the Nazis. This is important to understand, especially for those of us that are dedicated to health regimes similar to those put out by the Seventh-day Adventists. Although it's important to note, the regimes of people such as Bernard McFadden, John Harvey Kellogg, these folks, these predate Nazi Germany. They predate the existence of Nazi Germany and the existence of these health regimes being accepted by Nazi Germany. But what Germany did is proved a lot of this through science, which John Harvey Kellogg was already doing, but it was proven with more distinct science, as you will see. So it's often lumped into the New Age category with Gwyneth Paltrow's raw food or Pete Evans' paleo diet, but the natural eating movement is far from new. In fact, its roots extend back to Nazi Germany and beyond. They go beyond. It's important to note that. But leave our food as natural as possible was the slogan coined in 1942 by Nazi physician Werner Koloth. Okay, the Nazis were very concerned with regenerating the Aryan body. So they had this big push to get people into healthier lifestyles, says Dr. Corina Treitel, associate professor of history at Washington University. But she says a precedent of prioritizing health for political gain was established well before then. The Nazis are really just a particularly nasty example, she says. Okay, so this dream of eating naturally has been politically promiscuous in many different cultures. Adele Davis, the American Adele Davis, the biochemist and the author, she was very big on this. Because a healthy population, you have to understand, if the goal of the government is the benefit of the people, a big part of the benefit of the people is their physical and mental health. Nutrition and exercise are a huge part of people's physical and mental health. The National Socialists understood that, as did people like John Harvey Kellogg and the women's temperance movement in this country did. Okay, so hungry people tend to riot. That's another problem. So the Nazis were interested in health for two main reasons. They really cared about propagandizing health practices that would support the Aryan body. The fact of the matter is, they actually wanted people to be healthy. That's a fact. Okay, they can try and politicize this all they want, but one of the goals of the National Socialist movement was, of course, that their people became healthy. Okay, it's important to understand what National Socialism was to create a new set of biological values, biological and ecological values. And you're going to see, as I go on, more about that. Eating more naturally, eating organic, and I want to make sure people understand this. This is not glorifying Hitler or glorifying National Socialism. What I am doing here, though, is showing the comparison of National Socialism with Trump-publicanism and the association of Adolf Hitler with Donald Trump is a severe insult to Mr. Hitler. Okay, so eating less meat, less refined sugar, and other processed foods was part of that health promotion in a racial sense. Ideas of nationalism were also relevant to eating natural foods, says University of Newcastle eugenics researcher Dr. Sasha Davis. For the Nazis, natural was aligned with ideas of blood and soil, or Blut und Boden, a popular Nazi slogan. There is this general idea that the natural food for the German or the Aryan body is the food that grows from German soil, Dr. Davis says. Now, you will see the concepts of the sattvic diet and things like that later on. So the second main reason Nazis propagandized natural eating relates to their concern about losing another war, the war on hunger. Okay, hunger had been one of the things that had defeated them in the First World War. And they wanted to make sure that Germans ate well during the next war. Dr. Treidel says when people get hungry, they tend to riot, and they tend to doubt the legitimacy of their government. She says hunger was a huge problem on the German home front from 1915 onwards. By 1917, it had gotten so bad that respectable people were stealing potatoes and bread, she says. People who had never been out on the streets to protest before were out on the streets protesting. It was really a very serious crisis for the German government. So, blah, 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 self-sufficiency, the ability to survive without relying on foreign imports was another priority of the Germans. Okay, Hitler had this belief that many right-wing Germans had that Wilhelm's Germany in the First World War fell because the home front broke. The problem is, Mussolini had pointed this out, a militarily strong country can be broken economically. Or if you rely on foreign food to eat, okay, you can be starved to death if people don't sell you food, okay? And that's a big thing. That's how a lot of countries can be taken out. Some of the only countries that can produce enough food, three big ones are the United States, Argentina, and Brazil are the three of the biggest food-producing countries on the face of the earth that can actually feed their own populations if they produce enough food, okay, and still have food left over to export it. So countries like China and India, etc., they depend on the United States, Argentina, and Brazil to export nutritious food crops like soybeans, maize, and other things. Germany wanted to make sure it could feed itself. Germany didn't produce enough meat to meet its needs, and so imported meat, pork and beef from abroad. Self-sufficiency would mean eating less of it, or eating none of it, because it's an unnecessary thing. Self-sufficiency would mean eating less of it. Local fish replaced meat. Now, another thing, the Soviet Union used to allow fishing to provide fish for the table. Like the people could just go fish, which is an excellent idea. I think we need more of that in this country, actually. The aim of replacing imports with domestic products was really driving the natural eating agenda, Dr. Davis said. So, not using artificial additives or eating overly processed foods was considered not only healthier, but more economic. Okay, if you consume whole grain bread instead of white bread, you're making better use of the grain. You're using more of the grain, And so as a result, the food goes further, and that economic factor is always in the background, Dr. Davis says. Nazis picking up on older concerns. The Nazis were not unique in their concern for producing healthier people. Everybody should be concerned about producing healthier people. Rather, consideration about the impacts of health on society arose with industrialization, which brought with it health challenges. The Germans picked up on the concerns were older in society, yada, 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 yada. He says the fears of racial degeneration, yada, yada, yada. And this is what you have to understand. You should read John Harvey Kellogg's books and learn about John Harvey Kellogg's racial betterment concepts and things like that. These are all very important and very intertwined. And they go back further than Germany, okay? Old natural eating idea is still relevant. The Nazis fell from power in 1945, but Dr. Treitel says natural food has remained an important part of German culture because it matters. It works, okay? Organic farming is still very, very popular in Germany, she says. The current German government even has an official policy now of sustainable agriculture, which is really built on some of these ideas that the Nazis also promoted. There could be an enduring economic imperative for natural eating, albeit a different one, for one from the, quote, fascist era. Remember, National Socialism is not fascism. Fascism, the only country ever to be fascist, well, there were actually two, but the big one was Italy, and followed by Italy was Austria for a short time until Hitler conquered Austria. But you can feed more people. I'm not the first person to say this. You can talk to economists. This is what's important. If you have vegetarians, you can sustain more people in a more healthful manner on a vegetarian diet. And you think this goes all the way back to Plato's Republic. He talked about it in Plato's Republic, okay? The philosopher Plato. Eating naturally is much more efficient on your resources than eating our typical industrialized diets of lots of meat, lots of refined sugar, lots of imported foods, and so on. So keep in mind, the meat and sweet diet, sometimes called the Western diet, which is not accurate, because our current diet that people commonly eat today is not the Western diet. And I did a whole video series on this called Atavism is Where It's At. This is not the American diet, what Americans eat. But if you eat more naturally, less processed foods that are locally produced and not full of shit, and a lot less meat and no refined sugar, things like that, you're going to get healthier. And that the meat and sweet diet we know is a big killer. And I've talked about 1,000,000 times. I don't think meat is the big problem. It's part of the problem, but not the major problem. The big problem is the refined carbohydrate, and that has been proven with research. Moving forward. So what was public health under the Third Reich? German views on public health developed within the context of German cultural traditions and medical science. It's important to understand medical science. Remember, the Third Reich was trying to create a new set of biological and ecological values, which you're going to see. Many of the regime's public health policies, such as eugenics, group exercise, and warnings against alcohol and tobacco, were first popularized during the years of the Weimar Republic. For example, in a 1930s film, Born Out of Necessity, young Germans are urged to fight the negative health effects of life in modern cities by exercising together and engaging in wholesome social activities instead of drinking and smoking. These themes were later reflected in public health policies after the Nazi rise to power in 1933. Take note, these were also promoted in the United States and in England and anywhere else. Of course, at the time, tobacco was not frowned upon in the United States and England as much because they didn't know about it, but the Germans did. The Germans were the first to scientifically prove that smoking causes cancer. German public health officials adopted many of these traditions and ideas, but the German regime's public health policies were concerned solely with promoting the health of the so-called Aryan Germans. According to German ideology, every member of the so-called Volksgemeinschaft, German racial community, was like a single cell. Now, take note of this because this is very important to understand. The concept of fascism being essentially just means you're stronger in a unified sense, okay? Like Hillary Clinton's motto, stronger together. Stronger together. So keep in mind that every single citizen is like a single cell in a larger national body. Each individual had a duty, and this is, if more Americans thought this way, we would not be in the crisis we are in. Every single individual had a duty to stay healthy and strong so that the nation could conquer other people and colonize their lands, or simply survive. Okay, I think that's a little bit of a ridiculousness. They're saying it like that, but so these theories about but you keep in mind, each individual is like a cell in the greater body, and if one of those cells is not healthy, eventually other cells will be unhealthy until a whole organ fails. Okay, think of the waste removal services and the agricultural sector. Think of these things as different tissues, different organ systems of the body. And if they start failing, the organism falls, okay? The greater organism, the society as an organism will perish. These theories about individual health and national strength were influential throughout Europe and the United States in the early 20th century. Yes, they were. And that's why people should familiarize themselves with John Harvey Kellogg's writings. However, the German policies were much more extreme. No, they weren't. They were not, because if you think about it, in the United States, they were sterilizing the mentally challenged long before they were doing it in Germany. In fact, the California Eugenics Society are the ones that educated the Germans on eugenics. So let's keep things in context here. To help realize the regime's goals, the German public health initiatives focused on increasing the size and health of the population. Now, if our government focused on increasing the size and health of the United States population, as opposed to continually importing foreigners, maybe we wouldn't have somebody like Donald Trump, doing so well in the polls. Know what I mean? Maybe if other politicians saw the need to focus on helping to increase the health and the well-being and the reproductive health and the number of children people had, maybe we wouldn't have to import so many foreigners into the country. Just saying, maybe we wouldn't be in the situation we're in right now. Just saying. So, the SS created the Lebensborn program in late 1935 in an attempt to raise the German birth rate. A brochure from the Lebensborn program explains that only pregnant women of good health, genetic health, and Aryan descent would be considered for admission. Now, I want to clarify. I'm not putting a racial tinge to this. I'm not saying anything about race. But what I am saying is Americans of all races should be encouraged and financially compensated and materially compensated to reproduce as many healthy and smart American children as possible. Okay? Would be considered for admission to the program's maternity homes. German theories of eugenics taught that those born with mental or physical disabilities weakened the collective genetic health and strength of the Volksgemeinschaft, and were life unworthy of life. The propaganda pamphlet, But Who Are You?, provides instructions for creating detailed ancestral charts in order to identify any threats to the heredity, to the hereditary health of the German nation. Health officials even urged German citizens to report sexual partners suspected of having a sexually transmitted disease, as shown in 1938 propaganda poster sexually transmitted disease is an obstacle to marriage. That doesn't really sound that crazy, honestly, but whatever. The German regime urged Germans to adopt healthy lifestyles and healthy personal habits. So German health programs pushed the idea of a wholesome and natural diet and a natural lifestyle as a remedy for many of the health concerns in modern society. German public health campaigns often promoted the importance of fresh air and nutritious food, as shown in the 1941 German propaganda film, The English Disease. A 1939 newspaper article titled Nazis Hit Alcohol, Tobacco records Nazi health leaders' declarations that rejecting tobacco and alcohol in favor of a wholesome life was a national duty. I think that maybe our government should do that. You know what I mean? Now, keep in mind, they did not outlaw tobacco. They did not outlaw alcohol. What they did is they were encouraging people to pursue their national duty of adopting a wholesome lifestyle. Remember, National Socialist Germany was a mixed system. It was part socialist and part capitalist. It was a mixed system. They did not need to outlaw alcohol or tobacco. They simply needed to promote the national duty of the citizen through education, to go after and pursue a healthy and wholesome lifestyle. German public health propaganda promoted a return to natural living, but German health officials also embraced modern medical innovations. So this is kind of like comparing John Harvey Kellogg's approach, biologic living, to the other approach by, say, Ben Clausen of salubrious living. Biologic living, far superior to salubrious living. Just throwing that out there. So, the German regime organized mass X-ray screenings for cancer, tuberculosis, and other illnesses. German propaganda urged Germans to trust the advice of medical doctors over the hocus pocus, and this is, I think, given by quacks, offering miracle cures, as seen in the 1941 propaganda film On Cancer Treatment, 1 in 8. Exercise and physical fitness were among the most important elements of the German regime's approach to public health. German health officials called for every member of the so-called Aryan community to do regular physical exercises, focusing particular attention on developing the health and strength of German youth. The German regime embraced popular German pastimes like hiking and gymnastics. German youth groups organized many outdoor group exercises and tended to build a sense of camaraderie. And teenage boys in the Hitler Youth often engaged in competitive athletic games and military-style exercises to prepare them to become strong soldiers. On the other hand, German ideology taught that young German women should do graceful exercises designed to help them become strong and healthy mothers, as shown in the 1937 propaganda film, Healthy Woman, Healthy Nation. The regime also organized many athletic activities under the recreational Strength Through Joy program. A 1937 photograph of a Strength Through Joy event shows the popularity of these public exercise programs. Okay. German soldiers and concentration camp guards often used forced exercise as a form of public humiliation, physical abuse, or punishment. Taking blah, blah, blah. I'm going to move on here. People might think I'm trying to cover things up. No, you can go back and read this on your own. It's just outside the realm of this video to promote how exercise was used as punishment. So who is Savitra Devi? Savitra Devi whatever, because she married an Indian dude, was born Maximiani Julia Portas on the 30th of September, 1905, and she lived until 1982. She was a French-born Greek fascist National Socialist and spy who served the Axis powers by committing acts of espionage against the Allied forces in India. Okay? So education, yada, 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 da, 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 allegiance, Germany, yada, yada, da. Her writings have influenced new National Socialism and National Socialist occultism. She rejected Judaism and Christianity, which, as I showed you with the whole Yahwism thing, and if you don't, look at my Yahwism playlist, there's a very good reason to reject Judaism and Christianity, as it's the worship of it's a bloodthirsty pagan thing, you know what I mean? She believed in a form of pantheistic monism. Pantheistic monism, remember I promote scientific pantheism. People can look into that by going to pantheism.net. A single cosmos of nature composed of divine energy. Within new National Socialism, she promoted occultism and ecology. Keep that in mind, ecology. Remember, I said the Germans were trying to create a new ecological and biological set of ethics. The New Age movement, and more contemporaneously, she has influenced the, quote, alt-right. Okay. She also influenced the Chilean diplomat Miguel Serrano. In 1982, Franco Frida published a German translation of her work, Gold in the Furnace. Okay, early years, da-da-da-da. These are some of her books. Okay, now this is what you have to understand. National Socialism. There are 3 key points that make vegetarianism an important part of those that embrace a National Socialist mindset. The number 1, of course, is health cultivation. Because as an individual, you are an individual cell in the greater organism of society. Okay? Number 1, physical health cultivation, mental and physical health cultivation. Number 2, ecology, the health of the environment, and the connection of the individual to the environment, the, quote, blood and soil connection. Number 3 is ethics. Okay? It's the ethics. It's unethical and against National Socialist ethics to murder animals. Okay? People might find that odd, but that's the truth. So she wrote a book called The Impeachment of Man. Like Mr. Hitler, Ms. Devi was actually a dedicated anti-vivisectionist. So in 1959 in India, she wrote The Impeachment of Man. According to her, human beings do not stand above animals. Now, this is important to understand. This was one of the things that drew me to the continued practice of Levian Satanism. As people know, my father was a Satanist, yada, yada, yada. But Satanism holds the same thing. According to her, human beings are not above animals. Okay? And her ecologist views, or ecological views, humans are part of the ecosystem. And as a result, they should respect all life, including animals and the whole of nature. So keep that in mind. Keep this in mind. According to Savitra Devi, human beings aren't above animals. And this is true with pantheism, all pantheism. In her ecological view, her ecological worldview, and this was also promoted by the National Socialist Party, humans are a part of the greater ecosystem and must respect all life, including animals and plants and everything else. And I would recommend people read up on Jainism and other dharmic religions as well. She also held radical views with regard to vegetarianism and believed that people who do not respect nature or animals should be executed. She also believed that vivisection, circuses, slaughter, and fur industries, among others, do not belong in any civilized society. So keep that in mind. Do these sound like similar values? These are not hippie values. These are not liberal values. This woman was a dedicated National Socialist. She also held radical views with regard to vegetarianism and believed that people who do not respect nature and do not respect animals should be executed. That's not my opinion. I do not have a militant view on that. I believe people should eat whatever they feel like eating. I do not put animals above people, but I do agree that we should seek to reclaim our role in an ecosystem and live as much as possible in connection with the natural world. Now, she was also a firm believer that vivisection, which means animal experimentation, circuses, slaughter of animals for meat and fur were, among other things, something that did not belong in any civilized society moving forward. So, as I stated, from an economic standpoint, you'd have to be a fucking retard not to know that sustainable eating is cheaper and healthier. So, global study shows vegan and vegetarian diets are the cheapest option in high-income countries. Global study shows vegan and vegetarian diets are the cheapest in high-income countries. Oxford University, that's a pretty respected university, right, has today revealed that in countries such as the United States, the UK, Australia, Western Europe, adopting a vegan, vegetarian, or flexitarian diet could slash your frickin' food bill. Okay, remember, that was one of the reasons the Germans under the Third Reich embraced vegetarianism, was to have a strong, healthy, well-fed population. So, when scientists advocate for healthy and environmentally friendly eating, it's often said we're sitting in our ivory towers promoting something financially out of reach for most. This is, when I worked with fat people, this is one of the most fucking obnoxious things fat people do not understand. Even if you are eating meat, if you are sticking to a whole food diet that is majority plants, majority whole grains, vegetables, some fruit, and a little bit of meat, or even a lot of meat. Now meat went up, but even if you are eating meat, eggs, dairy, etc., if you're sticking to a whole food diet, if you're eating only healthy, unprocessed foods, you're going to be paying a whole hell of a lot the fuck less than if you're buying a bunch of fucking potato chips and pretzels and fucking mock meats and Slim Jims and summer sausages and lunch meats and cheeses and what have you. So if you stick to a whole food diet, a minimally processed diet, you're going to be spending a lot less fucking money than you would be if you're eating a meat and sweet diet. You're also going to be spending even less money if you go vegan or vegetarian. So it found that high-income countries, vegan diets were the most affordable and reduced food costs by up to 1/3. Vegetarian diets were a close second. Flexitarian diets with low amounts of meat and dairy reduced costs by 14%. A flexitarian diet, a so-called flexitarian diet, which is, it's a healthy omnivore diet. That's what a flexitarian fucking diet is, okay? So a flexitarian diet, or eating the way you're supposed to fucking eat anyway, okay, like a Mediterranean diet, reduced costs 14%, and a pescatarian diet increased costs by 2%. That's because you're eating a lot of fish and shit. But it doesn't have to, okay? And I recommend most people, for health cultivation, go to a flexitarian diet, which is a majority plant. It's a plant-centered diet with a little bit of meat, a little bit of eggs, a little bit of fish, a little bit of everything, except no bullshit, no refined bullshit, no sugars, no added sugars, no shit like that. It's just a generally healthy, omnivorous diet, similar to like that promoted by the USDA, but without any of the bullshit. No refined shit. So they think the fact that vegan, vegetarian, and flexitarian diets can save you a lot of money is going to surprise people. It only surprises the mentally retarded. When scientists advocate for blah, 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 okay, so I definitely agree that cutting down on your meat or cutting it out completely will save you money without a doubt. Vegan and vegetarian meals consistently come in at a lower price than recipes with meat. Duh. Okay? So I want people to read this on their own and absorb what it is saying. Okay? Especially if you're on food stamps or you're on a real fixed budget, think about the benefit of not spending all your fucking money on snack foods and actually eating shit that's, good for you, that's going to make you healthier. So this is about the sad truth is in India, because they're switching to more affluent diets with more meat and more shit like that, it's damaging their environment, and that's not a good thing. But you can read this on your own, but let's see. So globally, 45, blah, 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 blah. Let me just go down to the conclusion here. So this study investigated or estimated the changes in mental footprints that would result from shifting current national diets to scenarios of healthy or affluent diets in the context of India's dual burden of undernutrition and overweight/obesity. Given that dietary shifts, blah, 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 so various food groups contributed to these, many studies, yada, 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 yada. So, of course, the biggest footprint additive is going to be meat. Our study has several limitations, yada, yada, yada. Okay, let's see, did I miss it? Various food groups contributed to these shifts across the scenarios and subpopulations studied. For example, in a transition to the affluent diet, meat and dairy were largely responsible for the increase in all environmental footprints. A decrease in cereals and oils drove the environmental benefits. Okay, so decreasing cereals and oils and increasing vegetable consumption. So keep this in mind. A broad diversification of increased intake across pulses, vegetables, and meat drove increases in footprint. Of course, if you're increasing it, but if you stick to your vegetables and pulses, keep in mind that pulses, beans, put nitrogen into the dirt, okay? And if you start utilizing organic farming methods with, you start to improve the quality of the soil instead of if you start using no-till organic farming methods, you start to improve the soil quality instead of destroy the soil quality. But yes, I really do think people need to look into permaculture, things of that nature, moving forward. So a very good reason to avoid meat, of course, is the health concerns. Recent evidence from large prospective U.S. and European cohort studies and from meta-analyses of epidemiological studies indicates that a long-term consumption of increasing amounts of meat, and particularly of processed meat. This is important to understand because if you're eating red meat and you're steaming the meat or boiling the meat or stewing the meat, it's not going to pose as big of a threat to you as processed meat does. Processed meat is what is considered a carcinogen on par with smoking. It is not red meat per se. Red meat, like I said, if you're steaming it, if you're boiling it, if you're stewing it, that takes away a lot of the carcinogenic formation that's caused by cooking it with dry heat. So the association persists after inclusion of known confounding factors. So keep this in mind. Even after they're looking into, they're including things such as age, race, how fat you are, history, smoking, blood pressure, lipids, blah, 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 blah. Meat is associated with you dying early and having health problems, okay? So the association has not always been noted with red meat. Keep that in mind, just like I said. It's not always been noted with red meat, and it has been absent with white meat. There is evidence of several mechanisms for now, white meat does not include pork, just so people understand that. There is evidence of several mechanisms for the observed adverse effects that might be involved. However, their individual role is not defined at present. It is concluded that recommendations for the consumption of unprocessed red meat, and particularly of processed meat, should be more restrictive. I believe that processed meat should be eliminated. Okay, period. People should not be eating processed meat. If you're eating red meat, make sure you're not eating a ton of it. Make sure you're eating all your vegetables and whatnot, but also make sure that you're steaming it or boiling it or stewing it, etc. I mean, it's not fucking rocket science. We know these things, So what is eco-fascism? Eco-fascism is a term used to describe individuals and groups which combine environmentalism with fascism. You can read this on your own. What's a bio-Nazi? Okay, so the cult German police television program, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Vegetarianism, veganism, and other forms of clean eating and organic farming are often associated with leftist progressive movements. These food practices often... Now, what I want people to understand, and I'm going to show this later, if you were to assign National Socialism into a left or right paradigm, it wouldn't fit. What it does fit into in a modern political context is green politics, and I'm going to show you that in a little bit. So progressive movement, blah, 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 these foods, blah, 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 desire for bodily... So the food practices often combine a desire for bodily health with moral, social concerns. Now remember, you have crazy people now saying that if you care about your health, you're a right-wing extremist. That's a thing. Look it up. That's a thing. If you exercise, you're considered a right-wing extremist at this point because people are insane. Okay? So... Indeed, interest in animal rights or in the protection of the environment seems to be within the special purview of green politics. In recent years, however, clean food production and even ethical treatment of animals have been co-opted by... They have not been co-opted by the far right. And as I noted, National Socialism is not far right, it's radical centrism to anybody with a goddamn brain, and it fits into green politics anyway, as I showed you. The National Socialists have always been concerned about the environment. This is not something new, okay? This kind of appropriation is not new. In Germany, natural eating started out primarily as a left-wing idea in the 19th century. This is what I love about this. Left-wing, right-wing, left-wing, right-wing. It's how you fucking eat. These are good ideas. Is it left-wing or is it right-wing? Does it really fucking matter? Like, honestly, diet and politics have always been closely entwined, but in ever-changing ways, clean eating is shifting back to the right. So-called white supremacists in Germany and elsewhere are embracing diets free of animal products, demonstrating recipes on YouTube, and arguing for the suitability of vegetarian diets for the Aryan people. This is not new, because these are the people that started this fucking 100 years ago, for God's sake. In 2012, a study carried out by Heinrich Boll, that's like saying, what's funny about this, eugenics was embraced by the left wing originally, if they want to call it the left wing. So does that mean that the Germans co-opted eugenics? They co-opted sterilization from the left wing? They notice they're not talking about that. You know what I mean? Give me a break. Because a vegetarian diet requires less arable land to produce than a meat-based one, adopting it could help Germany become agriculturally self-sufficient. Every country on earth that can must be agriculturally self-sufficient, or it is not a sustainable thing. Okay? That's just the truth. Every country needs to become agriculturally self-sufficient. And one of the biggest steps towards that are things like vertical farming. And you're not going to get there by eating a lot of meat. You're going to get there by eating a lot of legumes, a lot of beans, a lot of pulses, a lot of greens. Okay? You're not going to get there, not even by eating a lot of grains. Okay? So a big step in the right direction is to get rid of animal agriculture. Use that land for the growing of fruits that can't be grown inside, and then begin to start using vertical farming, hydroponic vertical farming with perfect, all 90 essential nutrients, in order to get to where you need to get to with food production. If you made a couple skyscrapers full of vertical farms in Philadelphia, right down the road from me, you could probably feed damn near a large portion of the country with maybe 6 or so skyscrapers of food production. Okay? So some articles are innocuous, blah, blah, blah. You get the point. This is about the bio-Nazis. Now, what does Donald Trump, like I said, we're going to compare Donald Trump's eating habits to Mr. Hitler. So Mr. Trump to Mr. Hitler. Let's see, what does Trump eat in a day? It's listed here somewhere. So, when he does break his fast in the morning, he eats either bacon and egg cereal or a McDonald's McMuffin. He doesn't drink coffee or tea. He said my favorite would be bacon and eggs. Bacon, medium, and the eggs over well. If you're not familiar with American diner egg parlance, that means that the egg is fried and flipped during cooking and has an intact, fully cooked yolk. A dietitian who analyzed Trump's diet for The Guardian said that the president should be replenishing the nutrients his body can't store overnight. Joe Travers, who, as well as being a dietitian, as the author of the Low-Fat Diet, said the bacon, it's a processed pork product, which has been linked to cancer. Remember, I was saying red meat is probably okay, especially if it's in moderation, but processed meat, probably something you should be avoiding. His risk of developing the disease will go up as he eats that. His high-protein diet can put added pressure on his organs. Now remember, I've done videos in the past, that's only if it's high animal protein. Plant protein doesn't seem to do that. So Trump reportedly isn't a fan of eating much during the day. His food habits are revealed in the book Let Trump Be Trump, written by former campaign manager Corey Lewandowski, where he claims that the president would usually go 14 to 16 hours without eating. As you can tell, he's practicing that intermittent fasting. So if you want to see what intermittent fasting can do to you if you don't watch your food quality, look at Trump and his remarkable health. He is a fan of meatloaf. However, in 2005, he and Melania appeared on Martha Stewart, where they prepared a meatloaf sandwich, which Trump said was his favorite kind. Meatloaf, which Trump enjoys in a sandwich. Travers says that a meatloaf sandwich is a decent lunch, but advises having it with brown bread. She said, meatloaf is essentially just meat. There's no roughage. And no fun. Now, if you make it with oatmeal, whenever I was a kid, when we would make oatmeal, when we would make meatloaf, we would, about a fourth of the volume of the meat would be oats. Like you would take, let's say a pound of meatloaf and a quarter of the volume of dry rolled oats, and you would mush it together with a couple eggs and whatnot, and that's how we would make meatloaf, but I don't know. So there was roughage in my meatloaf as a kid, and sometimes you would put hard-boiled eggs in the middle, things like that. If you don't feed your gut bacteria with fruit and vegetables, that can impact your immune system. Dinner, this is where Trump goes to town, having eaten lightly the rest of the day. He's a huge fan of fast food, including McDonald's. McDonald's, as his biggest supporters might say, McDonald's, the people that he wants to give the platinum plan to, Burger King and KFC, but not just for the tastiness and reliability. He likes fast food from a safety perspective. Trump did say in CNN, one bad hamburger, you can destroy McDonald's. One bad hamburger, you can take Wendy's. And all these other places, and they're out of business. Do you know how many times people get food poisoning from these places? Give me a fucking break. He says, I like cleanliness, and I think you're better off there than maybe some place that you have no idea where the food is coming from. His preferential order, according to Lewandowski, is a full McDonald's dinner of 2 Big Macs. Listen to this. 2 Big Macs, 2 Filet-O-Fish sandwiches, and a small chocolate shake for a total, this is over a day's worth of calories for most people, for a total of 2,430 calories. Now, do remember, Trump is quite a tall man, but Trump spoke to CNN host Anderson Cooper about his order, saying, "It's great stuff." He loves McDonald's so much, in fact, that he asked the White House kitchen to recreate the food. Annie Carney from Politico wrote that the in-house attempts to copy the food couldn't match the satisfaction of the originals, probably because they were using minimally processed foods. Trump is also a fan of pizza, although he doesn't eat the crust. When he's not eating fried chicken or burgers, Trump enjoys a good steak. He likes them cooked well done and served with... People might not know this. I went to Job Corps for culinary. This is like an atrocity against steak. He likes the steak cooked well done and served with ketchup. A waiter who served Trump and guests with BLT Steakhouse at the BLT Steakhouse said the president ordered a well-done steak, an aged New York strip, cooked well done and with ketchup. He ate it with catsup, as he always does. The sides and appetizers on the table were shared. 3 jumbo shrimp cocktails were delivered before the meal. Trump has a definite preference for how he likes his steaks cooked. His former butler said, "It would rock on the plate. It was so well done." Trump doesn't appear to like trying new things. When he dines at Jean Georges, a restaurant with 3 Michelin stars in the Trump International Tower in New York, Chris Christie says he requests a personalized order, the special thing you made for me, rather than experiment with the restaurant's other creative dishes. When it comes to eating at the White House, which happens frequently in the life of the president, Trump again has a preferred eating pattern. Time reported that Trump seems to like being served slightly different food to that of his guests. When they are served creamy vinaigrette on a salad, he receives Thousand Island dressing. When served chicken, he is the only one who gets extra sauce. And for dessert, he gets 2 scoops of vanilla ice cream with his piece of chocolate cream pie, when everyone else is stuck with 1. Snacks and drinks. The president loves Diet Coke. I love Diet Coke too. Well, really, I'm more of a Pepsi kind of guy ever since Coke told people to be less white. But yeah, I mean, seriously, nothing wrong with Diet Coke. Okay, but he drinks 12 cans a day. He doesn't drink alcohol, which that's a plus. That's a really good thing that he doesn't drink alcohol. Perhaps because his brother had a problem with the substance and told Trump not to drink. The verdict? Travers said Trump's chefs and advisors should think about slightly more balanced diet, and that a plate of food should be half filled with fruit and vegetables, a quarter with carbohydrates, and a quarter with protein. Okay. She also worried about his lack of food that contains omega-3 fatty acids, such as oily fish, nuts, and seeds. His body will substitute with other types of fat, which are less fluid, making it harder for neurotransmitters to go through. Meaning it will decrease your ability to think properly and think clearly. This is linked to mood disorders, Travers said. Bloomberg has reported that Trump has been eating differently in recent weeks, with one source saying that he doesn't eat a burger for 2 weeks and has swapped his usual fare for soup and salads. So far, Trump has embraced the routine. Moving forward. So that was Donald Trump's diet. Let's take a look at Mr. Hitler's diet. Okay, almost a vegetarian. Okay, during the Nazi blah, 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 blah. Okay, so let's, Hitler began to follow a strict vegetarian diet. His meals included eggs, spaghetti, oatmeal, stewed fruits, salads, soups, vegetable puddings, and baked potatoes with cottage cheese. So, Mr. Hitler's diet, as you can see, is far more well-balanced. Okay, it was a strict vegetarian diet with a typical which means lacto-ovo-vegetarian diet. It included eggs, spaghetti, oatmeal, stewed fruits, salads, soups, vegetable puddings, and baked potatoes with cottage cheese. His general repulsion of meat-based dishes is significant, as it represents one of the key aspects of his personality, disgust. Mr. Hitler was a clinical man who removed that which he saw as undesirable. This character trait, as well as we all know, went far beyond his personal dietary requirements. Okay. It is also well known that he had a sweet tooth, or at least it's well known to people that know about him. So he was fond of sugary snacks and desserts. He enjoyed pastries, sweets. At one stage, he consumed... Now, I call this into question because I don't think it's humanly possible, but he ate allegedly 2 pounds of chocolate every day. Sometimes he would even abandon a conference to eat some chocolate in private. His beverages followed suit. He often drank hot chocolate with whipped cream, but his favorite